I want to share with you the greatest day of any kid's life, the day that they get their first real bike. Am I right? Right? Wrong. Think again, not this kid. Because I knew exactly who was going to be teaching me to ride that bike. My dad. My dad, there's a couple things you need to know about him before we get this along. The number one thing is that he's a natural athlete. He makes everything athletic look easy. So much so that he thinks it actually is easy. So teaching me to ride a bike was going to be like letting the dogs out. You know, you just open the door and look, there they go. The second thing you need to know about my dad is that he had a rough and tumble childhood filled with colorful stories that should have been documented by a caseworker. My favorite one, and I don't have time to get into it, is the time he got a scar on his forehead from playing catch the brick. So to my dad, a little bit of grit, a little bit of trouble, a little bit of stitches, makes for a well-rounded childhood. And the final thing you need to know about my dad is that, and the most important, is that the tent pole of his parenting philosophy was making sure that I would be employable. So if he was helping me study for a spelling test and I missed a word, he'd look at me and he'd say, "Terri, how are you ever going to be a nurse if you can't spell penicillin?" He desperately wanted me to be a nurse. So I knew exactly what was coming with these lessons. Disappointment, his. Tears, mine. So the lessons start pretty much how you would expect, right? Him yelling at me from down the street while I plowed into mailboxes, careened through flower gardens, tipped over curbs. I was like the poster child for Neosporin with my scraped knees and elbows. Did you know, fun fact, that future nurses aren't afraid of blood? I didn't either. But my dad was determined and I was there. And we made progress. I could go forward. I could stay upright. And you may be asking yourself, what more is there to bike riding, Terri? That would be making turns. I had somehow convinced myself that making a turn, left or right, didn't matter. To make a turn would mean I would fall over, hit my head, bleed out, and die. And I was terrified of making turns. And so I told my dad. He noticed what I was doing instead of making turns, which was stopping my bike completely and just, dragging it around to make the turn. And I thought that worked. And he's like, "Terri, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm afraid that if I make a turn, I'm going to die." And he's like, "That's not a thing. Get back on the bike, stop messing around, let's go." So I get back on the bike and I have this epiphany that if I make the turn wide enough and slow enough, that it wasn't really like making a turn at all. It was more like a lazy circle. So I get back on my bike and I'm going down the street and I start making my lazy circle and I get to the edge and out of the corner of my eye I see it. It's a white pickup truck parked directly in my path. And I knew in that second I was going to hit that truck. And let me emphasize that I had plenty of time to turn. Oceans of time, Austin Powers amount of time to turn this bike, which I would if I could turn, but I couldn't. And yeah, I know, I'll never be a nurse. So there's nothing left to do except my fate. And I close my eyes and I just plow face first into this truck, kamikaze style. I bounce off, I'm on the ground, I'm staring up at the sky, my bike's over me, my dad's like running down the street. "Jesus Christ, Terri, what'd you do that for?" I guess not turning your bike is a thing. We quit that day, but my dad didn't quit on me. I eventually did learn to ride a bike and to bait a hook and catch a wave and shoot a basketball. And you're not even going to believe this, but does anyone want to guess what I grew up to be? A nurse? No. Think again. I am not a nurse. Think again, Dad.